Hi all. Thank you for joining. My name is Shane Murphy. I am Technical and Sales Director at Ashgrove, and just do a sound check. Yeah, all okay. Yeah, thank you for joining. Today we're going to be covering home energy upgrades, the various types, what might suit you, what may not suit you, and yeah, that's it. We'll get stuck into it. You can ask questions there at the bottom of your screen. You can see a Q&A button. I'm monitoring this on a parallel screen here so I can see if any questions come in, and I'll answer them as I go, or alternatively, if they're unusual questions, I'll leave them until the end. But that's it. So, 2 seconds. Okay, so just a quick agenda for what we're going to cover. It typically takes about maybe an hour and 5 or 10 minutes, depending how many questions we get. We'll just do a quick introduction to where this is all coming from, tiny bit about Ashgrove's experience and what we've learned over maybe the last, or what we've done over the last 22 years since 2001. We'll talk about the grant types, and we'll talk about the criteria. We'll talk about the administration and the process. So how does it work? Where do you start? And what are the benefits, etc. We'll talk a little bit about the technical side of the upgrades. So what's better, what's worse, maybe. We probably won't get an awful lot of time for that. We're probably better off maybe sticking to case studies. What are the different types of project? And then we probably won't be able to talk about funding options. Now, just on that, we do a longer version of this presentation, of this seminar, face-to-face. It's a live seminar. We do it on the second Saturday of every month. We do it at a location in Mallow, which for us in Munster is a good location. We've been doing those now in some shape or form for about 10 years. And it's free education. It's no stress, hopefully, for the participants. They can sit there the same as you are today, without feeling the pressure of having to meet maybe a salesperson. Some people are allergic to that. So we've been doing this for quite a long time. We hope it's of interest to you. So we'll plow on. Okay. So one thing I suppose with any of these grants that we're talking about, they're funded, as you can see here, through Sustainable Energy Ireland. In today's case, we'll be talking about SAI grants. Their job is to deliver or to assist through incentives or regulation the transition to our low carbon future over the next 3 decades. Tiny bit about Ashgrove. We're in business since 2001. We're working with SAI, Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, since 2006. I'd have to say that they're really easy to work with these days. Back in the day, it was difficult. I suppose everybody was finding their way. There's still parts of it that are evolving, and there are new schemes and stuff popping up all the time. And we find that there's still a lot of confusion. But once you're inside these grants and dealing with them daily, they're typically fairly straightforward. But I understand as a homeowner, or maybe as a builder or something like that, we can understand the confusion. So Ashgrove is a registered one-stop shop. A one-stop shop is an approved body. SAI have approved us as a one-stop shop to, number one, I suppose, advise you, and number two, to carry out projects for you or with you. And so I suppose what we're doing this evening is the advice bit. The one-stop shop was a program set up, I suppose, about a year and a bit ago, which was I suppose there were greater grant amounts than there were previously available to the homeowner. But what I would say is, whilst the one-stop shop is a fantastic mechanism, it's probably suited to about 60 to 70% of the projects that we see, and it is unsuitable or unsuited to the remainder, right? And so just keep in mind, the one-stop shop is great. It may not be suitable for your project. And we I suppose daily and weekly, we're hearing stories where people are frustrated with it. There may be a parallel scheme here, which is all the advantages of the one-stop shop, the same grant amounts. You can still get project management grants. You can get all these bonus payments that you might have heard about, but without some of the restrictions that are tied to a one-stop shop. Now, I shouldn't be saying that we are a one-stop shop provider, but I think we should keep in mind that it's great, but it does have limitations for certain projects. For other projects, it's fantastic. So we're also a Bord Gáis premier solar installer. There are only 4 in the country. And again, similarly, it's a stamp of approval. We're a technical company. We're around a long time. We have, I suppose, a long and strong track record for high quality from the technical side of it, and also the paperwork side of it, the quality and after sales, etc. We have about 16,000 projects in operation around Ireland and the UK over the last 20 years. Last year, we did about 1,400 projects in Ireland, that was. So, and as I've said, any questions, fire them in there to the Q&A box. We're duty bound to always mention that any of these grants are coming from the Government of Ireland. Okay, so a tiny bit about Ashgrove. I won't bore you with it, but I suppose we're coming from the renewable energy side of things. We're heat pump guys, we're solar guys, ventilation, heating specialists, and I suppose you know, these are some examples. This first project here on the left is a block of apartments, 16-story block of apartments in just outside London in Reading. We did this probably 4 or 5 years ago. A highly technical project. The next one is a very large house that we did in Ireland in 2006, if I'm not mistaken. That's a 60,000 square foot house, and that's again with heat pumps, using them for both heating and cooling and to heat hot water and to do swimming pools and all of that. And lastly, there, just as an example of, I suppose, our technical expertise is, this is a project in Scotland. It's a 1.2 megawatt heat pump plant, and it's taking its heat from a local lake, and it's driven by wind and hydropower. And so we built that in Ireland. We shipped it and commissioned it in Scotland. Now, why are we telling you about any of this today? I suppose number one, we're a technically, I suppose, competent company. Number two, I suppose we have a team of project managers, and if they can carry out projects like this, typically a homeowner might conclude that we can do a house. And thirdly, I suppose all of these projects, as you can imagine, are very heavy in paperwork, checklists, mistake elimination, and a sign off and all of that. So it's not that we're going to be discussing any of these projects anymore. It's simply to make those 3 points. We're around a long time. We're a technical company, and our practices, our procedures, and so on at this stage we would consider really good. So, what are the benefits of a home energy upgrade? These will be obvious enough. We won't hang around on it. Reduced energy costs, obvious enough. Warmer homes. Some people just want warmer homes. They're kind of okay with the energy cost if they had more heat. Obviously, a big push now from the Irish government and Europe, and I suppose globally, is that we need to be more environmentally friendly and reduce our carbon footprint. So most of the houses that we will do these days will have to achieve a BER of a B2 or better. We'll be talking about that in a little bit more detail. An advantage here is that according to a recent report, if you're inside of Greater Dublin and you go from a D2 to a B2, you're increasing the value of your home by 16%. If you're outside of Dublin or Greater Dublin, to go from a BER of D2 to a B2, you're increasing the value of your home by 12%. So quite apart from the fact that you're maybe lowering your mortgage, as we'll see here, lowering your mortgage interest rate, and saving on that, you're also saving on your energy costs, but you're also increasing the value of your asset. So better air quality. I was going to say we'd be talking about it more, but we won't actually in this seminar. But something that we often forget in Ireland is that when we insulate a home, you could be sealing it such that you don't get decent ventilation through the house, and you end up with mold and mildew and so on. We have the third highest rate of asthma in the world, and yes, we have high humidity, and of course that brings with it obvious problems, but also we don't seem to value ventilation. So quite often we see people, when they move into their new homes and they have trickle vents on the walls or whatever it is, the first thing they'll do is close the vents, and sure enough, third highest rate of asthma. So that's something we have to be mindful of as we insulate and make the house better. Make sure that there isn't an unwanted consequence. So the green mortgage. So once you get above a B3, you're into green mortgage territory with the main mortgage providers. We've seen this to be up to 0.9% lower than your standard mortgage rate. Now, I'd have to say that 0.9 is the highest we've seen, or the highest we've seen. I would say more typical is probably 0.5 or 0.6 or 0.4 or something like that of an improvement over your typical rate. So, and also if it's not a mortgage that somebody is going for a home upgrade, there are low interest rate green loans available now, and there are more on the way. So why would anybody come to a webinar or a seminar like this? We've seen this for a number of years, that the homeowner or the client is confused by what's going on. They're aware of bits of information, they're aware of SAAI, don't know their role. Maybe they're aware that there's a BER assessor out there. Should I go to him, or should I go to the solar guy, or who do I go to? And so I suppose our job is, and again, as I said at the start, we've been doing this for 10 years, try to make it as simple as possible for the homeowner. This is not difficult stuff. For some reason, our trades people or our professionals quite often aren't great at communicating. But our job is essentially to sit facing the customer. This is our job as a one-stop shop. But as I say, we've been doing it for 10 years. Our job here is to make it as simple as possible for the customer to steer through this whole maze of poor information and poor opinions and pub talk. So and that's the aim of this today. So we will give you the advice. Here are the grants. Here is who you need to talk to first, and what is your likelihood of getting through this process. So we know when we look at any project through, I suppose, years of experience, that 80% of the houses we see, we can tell within 3 minutes or 5 minutes of talking to the customer, you will get through on one of 3 or 4 different types of grants, or you definitely won't, or it's 50-50 and we don't know how to advise you. But it would be a very small number of people that we don't know where they fit in. In a case like that, we would tell the customer we need to do a BER, and in that case, by doing the BER, you find out for certain. But that's a very small number of cases, and for all the others, we can tell them very quickly. 80% of them will go through one grant or another. 10% of them or 15% of them will say old registered buildings, poorly insulated, real old houses, but people who don't want to upgrade the windows and so on, well, they won't get to the B2, and we will tell them, okay, if you're not willing to do that, you won't get to the B2 that we spoke about at the start, and therefore you will not fit into the grant that you're talking about. So we can tell very quickly. And we never have a scenario where a customer will get to the end of a project and find out, actually, you're not going to get the grant for some reason. We always know at the start of a project that a customer is guaranteed to get the grant. Now, unless somebody shoots themselves in the foot along the way, so we'll talk about some examples as we go, but we always know at the start whether a person is guaranteed to get the grants or not. So that's our job, to sit, I suppose, take SEI's grant and their criteria and their processes and their expectations, and to manage that then with all of the other contractors, either for you in some cases or with you in some of the cases as well. So there are different ways that it can occur. So what are the grants? So you have a fully funded energy upgrade. I'm not going to be talking about it today for the simple reason, number one, we're not on the framework for it. But number two, there's a 3-year wait list on it. A lot of people who want houses done up, they don't want it done in 3 years, they want it done today. So what we'll be talking about is individual energy upgrade grants. So this, we'll talk about it in a sec. One-stop shop grant. So this is the one you might all have heard about. Then there's a Better Energy Communities grant, which is a sister grant of the one-stop shop. It's called Better Energy Communities, or BEC. This grant has been around for quite a while, but it's very poorly understood. We would, even when we do webinars and seminars for maybe some of the professionals in the building industry, a lot of them would never have heard of this, even though we think it's a fantastic mechanism and very easy to deal with. So then we have the vacant house grant and we have the derelict house grant. So I'm going to start with those last two and just get them out of the way. They're nothing really to do with Ashgrove. You can get it from your local county council, but I'll just jump straight into it. So the vacant house grant is for a maximum of €50,000. So this is for any home upgrades, painting, tiling, redoing a kitchen, whatever it is. You have to be spending more than 50,000 to claim it. To qualify for it, the house needs to be vacant for more than 2 years, and evidence of this is typically provided or expected by means of an electricity bill. So either the electricity bill, they're there for the last 2 years and showing no energy usage, or we can demonstrate that the electricity was disconnected more than 2 years ago. Either way, provided it was vacant for more than 2 years and you're entitled to the grant, provided the house was built before 2007. Now, I suppose anything later than 2007 shouldn't be vacant in reality, and there's no good reason for it being vacant. Either way, that's it. Now, up until recently, this had to be for a house that you were going to live in yourself. But more recently, I'm going to say 3 months ago, 4 months ago, they also made it available for somebody who wanted to own a house as a landlord. So as an example, I could get a vacant house grant from my own house, which I am doing currently, but I could also own another house and I could equally get the vacant and derelict house grant for that. But I'm only allowed 2, and that's the end of that. It can't be a company owning a property and getting a vacant house grant. So, and to apply for it, you need to provide proof of ownership or evidence that you're in active negotiations. So once you're in active negotiations, they will accept that and they'll give you the go ahead to do the work. But of course, in order to claim the grant, you definitely need to, at that point, demonstrate that you're in full ownership and that and only then can you claim the grant. So the derelict house grant is a maximum. So this is essentially a 20,000 top up on top of the 50 for the vacant house grant. And so you have to be spending more than the 70 in this case, right? And the first thing you need to provide for them, if you're applying for this, is a report from a professional that the building is either structurally unsound, dangerous, or something along those lines. The roof is caving in. There is structural issues, we'll say, with walls or foundation or something like this, subsidence. And so that's the first thing you'll have to provide for them when you're applying for this. The second thing is a quotation of for the proposed works, right? You need evidence then that the local property tax is either up to date or that you're exempt. In my case, the house hadn't been lived in for probably 25 years and was truly derelict. There was no wall at all standing inside in the house and no plumbing, no wiring. So in that case, I had to get a letter saying I was exempt from property tax. I took a few photos of the house, sent it in, and they sent me back a letter saying, it took probably, I'm going to say 2 weeks. It was relatively painless and fast. So, but you have to have that before they will look at your application. And then any other supporting documentation that your local authority may request on your to support your application, but typically it's straightforward. So before I go any further, I want to make the point because at the moment, because of the price of electricity, heat pumps are taking a bit of a beating, and I just want to go through why it is, I suppose, that the government are shoving heat pumps on us, and also why some of the bad press that we're hearing is not fair. And to give you, I suppose, we're in this industry for 22 years, and to give you a considered, hopefully professional, opinion on it. But the reason that we're looking at heat pumps are that they're being shoved down our throats. They're 70 to 80% less carbon than oil or gas. That's a fact. They consume electricity. That electricity is increasingly coming from wind, solar, hydro, and some of it we import from the UK or maybe from France. And so our electricity is getting greener and greener. And at some point in the future, we might be where Norway or Sweden are today, where their electricity is practically completely green. And in that case, you can imagine your house would have zero carbon heating. Zero carbon, that's probably a strong statement, but significantly cheaper than, or significantly cleaner than oil or gas. And secondly, it's cheaper to run than oil or gas, but there are a few things to consider, right? So here is maybe just, when we talk about bad press, here is maybe 2 or 3 things to look out for. Quite often, poor heat pumps, I would say there probably aren't an awful lot of poor heat pumps. The second one is more likely the case, badly designed, badly installed. There should be no surprise with this. We don't do an awful lot of training with this stuff in Ireland. And, the same guy that, we give out about if he puts in a shower poorly or whatever, now is getting his hands on a heat pump for your house, and somehow we're surprised when he does a poor job with that. There isn't an awful lot of training. So just be careful that heat pumps aren't being blamed. Secondly, some people are just seeing electrical costs, are forgetting that last year they spent 2,000 on oil. Now they're spending 1,000 extra on electricity, and they just see the electricity costs going up, having forgotten that there's 2,000 gone on the far side. At the moment, what we're seeing is that when oil was expensive, or was cheap, relatively cheap 2 years ago, and they took out a heat pump, and today electricity is expensive. So it looks like the heat pump cost is more than oil. I'll give you a quick example of why that is not the case. But some people, when you talk to them, this is the scenario, but they haven't really thought it through. And I suppose lastly, we see people who think that they're, when they think that they're getting cheap energy, they're a little bit more relaxed about minding it. So, and just a quick calculation, this is how we would look at any house, and a little bit like the grants, we know before we start what the result is. As I said at the start, we've about 16,000 projects, probably 17,000 now, and we have all of that data. So when we look at a house, we know exactly what way it will perform in 12 months' time. Now, that the only proviso there might be if somebody, likes the house to be 26 or 27 degrees every now and then we come across that, or we come across somebody who opens all of the windows in the house every morning. Well, that house will not consume necessarily 30 kilowatt hours per square meter per annum, but we'll just take it that it will. That might be this might be a B2 house at 30 kilowatt hours, and then we just say it's 170 square meters. I multiply one by the other, and I now know that the house will take 5,100 kilowatt hours for heating for the year. That's very simple. That might be up or down 5 or 10%, but that's it. So it's useful to know these figures. Domestic hot water has a bigger range. Some people shower more, they have more baths. more in the family, etc. But right across Europe, the range for hot water is 1700 kilowatt hours, which might be something like a small apartment, to 5000 kilowatt hours, which is quite high there. When you see 5000 kilowatt hours, that's the same heating load as for your house. So at 5100 kilowatt hours. And again, we take just a middle of the road number there at 3400 kilowatt hours per annum. So we add these together and we get a total of 8300. And just to put a running cost on that, I know probably for most people, they don't know what a kilowatt hour is or a kilowatt. So we just put numbers on it. If I was using a heat pump and we had kind of at low efficiency of 330%, you can see there, I've just done the calculation. You're welcome to take a photo of that and check it if you don't believe me. But at 40 cent, which you see, where's my mouse gone? So at 40 cent, I'm paying €1,006 per annum for my heating and hot water. Whereas if I use oil, and the oil boiler is 80% efficient, and today oil is 15 cent, it's actually slightly higher than that, it's 16 cent in actual fact, but that's showing 1,556. So that's showing that the heat pump is about 1/3 cheaper. And so, by the way, those figures are coming straight from SEI's website, and they change those figures about every 3 or 4 months. I think we last updated them probably in April or something like that, but they're relatively current. But anyway, I'm not selling heat pumps. I'm just explaining, I suppose, at the start of this, because any way you go about home upgrades these days, heat pumps are being pushed on you because they're low carbon primarily, and provided they're properly done and with proper equipment, proper design, etc., and proper operation, they are cheaper. But every now and then we see projects that aren't, right? So, but there's no excuse for that. There must be a reason. So, and just how they work, and this is only 10 seconds for each. So that's your heat pump there in the middle. I put a kilowatt into it, right? That kilowatt allows the heat pump to run, and the heat pump's job is to take heat out of the outdoor air. And so when I pay for one and I get 4 from the outside air, I actually get 5 out the far side. So, and of course, if I must change that, that's an old slide, sorry guys. 20 cent, if that's the cost of my electricity going in, if I divide that by the 5 here, I'm getting 4 cents per kilowatt out the far side. Now, I need to multiply that figure by 2 because that 20 cent was too low. So that's 8 cents per kilowatt hour. We know today that oil is 16, so that's half the cost of oil. Now, anyway, I'll leave it like that. I was going to get more technical. We leave it alone. But secondly, if my electricity arriving to my house today is 250 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, if I divide that by 5, that's giving me kind of a result of around 50 grams per kilowatt hour by the time it hits my house. Compare that to kind of 200 to 300 for, well, gas might be around 180, but oil would be kind of 200 to 300 depending on the boiler. So that's it. So individual upgrades, individual energy upgrades. So we'll talk here about measures. A measure is any piece of work that I will do. I might insulate my attic. So in other words, I'm taking a measure. That's one measure. If I would insulate my walls, that would be a measure. So we'll be talking here about measures, even though funnily it's no mention of it in this slide. Either way, the individual energy upgrade is for somebody who wants to carry out one measure, or you could carry out a number of little projects, but they're all considered individual projects. So if I wanted to insulate my wall, I would apply for the grant for a wall. I would go and do it, and I claim the grant when I'm all finished. But simultaneously, I might decide to do my solar panels, but it's a number of little single projects. So a homeowner can do it, a landlord can do it. You manage the project yourself in this case. You pay for everything as you're doing it, and when you're all finished, you go and claim your grants. If you're going down this route, the grants, you should know, are taking probably somewhere around 6 or 8 weeks to claim at the moment. So if you're after spending, I don't know, 5 grand for your attic and wall insulation, and you're getting whatever it is, 3,000 or 3,500 in grants, you pay the 5,000 when you do the work. you will go off to claim your 3 or 3,500 when you're finished. So, and for this, if you're getting insulation grants, the house has to be built before 2011. They don't want to assist you to insulate your house if you built it 2 years ago and didn't insulate it properly. They don't view that as a taxpayer problem. They view that as your own problem, which is understandable. So whereas if you built a house in 2019 and didn't put in a heat pump or solar panels, well, in theory, you could have built a house in compliance with the building regulations quite recently and not have had a heat pump or solar panel. So they will grant aid you for those. So you'll find on SEI's website the list of grants and the list of grant amounts. We're not going to go through it in any great detail here. We will go through it for the one-stop shop and for the BEC. What is relevant for this is that if you're getting solar panels or attic insulation or wall insulation upgraded, when you apply for the grant, you have 6 months in which to complete the work. That's 12 months for the bigger projects, but 6 months is fair enough for a situation like this. It's a quick piece of work. There's no reason it needs to take more than 6 months. So I'm going to keep going. If you have any questions, I'm answering as good as I can as I'm going through them here. So but pop them into the Q&A box there, and I will deal with them as I come across them. So I'll just run down very quickly through these. You have heat pump. You can see here the grant for the heat pump is 6,500. You have solar panels. They're solar hot water 1,200. We see very little of that today. Attic insulation. You can see here that you have different amounts for mid-terrace, semi-detached, or end of terrace, and detached. So it goes from 1,200 to 1,300 to 1,500 for detached. Obviously, the detached has more outside walls. Quite often they're larger as well. So the detached house will always have larger amount. So you can see here cavity wall insulation, it goes from 800 to 1,200 to 1,700. Dry lining goes to 4,500. External wall insulation goes up to 8,000. And then you have the solar panel has a maximum of 2,400, which is not normally what people avail of, because that's 4 kilowatts or more. People typically don't go less than 4 kilowatts unless they don't have the roof space. I'm going to skip on to the multi-measure project. So this would be a sorry, I'm actually just going to compare first of all a BEH. So what we just looked at was a Better Energy Homes grant or an individual measure grant. We're going to compare that the amounts that are not available in a BEH compared to either a Better Energy Communities or a one-stop shop, right? So you can see here, just by way of comparison, you can see the amounts here. As an individual measure, you can't get a heating system upgrade. That's €2,000 to upgrade your radiators if they're too small or if they're old or whatever. You also, you're entitled, you're not entitled to a heat pump bonus payment. That's €2,000 under a one-stop shop or a BEC. Floor insulation is 3,500. You are not, well, you are entitled to that as a one-stop shop or a BEC. And so all of these ones, I'm just going to flick on to the next part of the slide so you can see here. So the bulk of these items stay the same at the top, but now you're getting, because you've fallen into a one-stop shop or a BEC, you're getting these bonus payments. So 2,000, rafter insulation. Sorry, rafter insulation was not, you can get in any case, it can be a BEH as well. It shouldn't be inside in that part of the slide there, sorry. Floor insulation, you can only get as a one-stop shop or a BEC. Windows, the same, €4,000. So sometimes we get people saying, I heard I couldn't get a grant for my windows. Yes, you can, but not as an individual measure. It has to be as part of a one-stop shop or a BEC. Okay. And then doors the same. You can get a maximum of 2 external doors, €800 each. You can get mechanical ventilation, air tightness, a home energy assessment. The home energy assessment grant under a BEC or one-stop shop is 350, whereas it's only 50 for a BEH, an individual measure grant. And lastly, there you can see for a detached house, you're getting a project management grant of €2,000. And so, so some of these works have to be carried out here by specialist contractors. So we have it in here as SC. So a heat pump obviously has to be an SAI contractor, a qualified contractor. Insulation is the same. It's not that it's a difficult job, but as I said at the start, if you install insulation into an attic or into a cavity wall, or you dry line a house, there's a chance that you're interfering with the ventilation. And so if you're doing so, the SCI need to know that the contractor is taking into account that there are people living in this house and that we're potentially reducing the amount of ventilation to such an extent that it might be unhealthy. And in that case, if we are, we need to provide fixed vents or a ventilation system. So essentially, when we're signing off on the insulation, whether it's attic or cavity wall or external wall, we're essentially saying, yes, we've fitted the insulation as you've asked us, but more importantly, the house is getting enough ventilation now. Good. And so, yeah, external wall, obviously a specialist contractor, the heat pump bonus specialist contractor. Now, I actually made a mistake here and put in windows needs to be a specialist contractor. That's not true. That can be anybody. Air tightness is a specialist contractor, and obviously the home energy assessment and the project management needs to be an SCI qualified person or company. So I'm going to keep going. I'm just going to go in now to the one-stop shop first of all. So what is a one-stop shop? So or who is it for? So a one-stop shop is for a homeowner, or again, a landlord who wants to carry out multiple energy upgrades, or often referred to as measures. And in this case, we have to get to a B2 when we're finished. Okay, a strong B3 is no good to us. You know, if we're 1% away from a B2, not good enough. We have to get to a B2. In this case, in a one-stop shop, Ashgrove or whoever our competitor is will manage everything for you. So we would give you a quote as an example, and we'll agree we're going to do your attic insulation, your cavity wall insulation, your back door, your front door, and your heat pump and your solar. And it's going to cost, I'm going to say 40,000, and we're getting grants of, I'm just going to say 20. You will pay us the 20. So there's a, you know, you pay us at the net amount. It's up to us to pay the 40 up front. We'll go off and we'll install whatever we're doing. We'll get the windows and doors, and when it's all finished, we have all of our paperwork. You sign your documentation and you pay us up your side of it, and we go off to the government to claim the other 20,000. And that for us takes typically about a week. Not that it matters to you. You don't need to worry about it. So, but it's a painless enough process. The criteria in this case, everything that we're doing, these houses have to be before 2011. Now, so I've added in our opinion, or Ashgrove's take on a one-stop shop here. When we look at a project and we talk to a homeowner, we decide it's a one-stop shop if there's no other contractor on site. So what we mean by that is, if there was a small builder, say you had your house, and it's we'll be coming to one of them in a second. Sorry, I'll keep it simple. I'm just going to, and I'll come to it, the other example, as I say, in a second. So there's no other contractor on site. All that you're talking about is works that maybe as an example of what we just discussed: attic insulation, pumped cavity insulation, solar panels, a heat pump, and I'm going to say 2 doors. All of that work can be done in probably 2 weeks, and there's no other contractor in there. So I leave it simplistically like that. And number 2, the project in its entirety can happen in less than 2 months. Now, that's Ashgrove's opinion on it. I'll tell you why it's important that in a second. We're going to start spending money on day 1. And we'll just say the project is finished in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Well, we can then go off and we can claim the remainder of our monies. And so but we don't want that project to have taken 12 months and we're only then going to claim our grants, because we're out of pocket maybe a substantial amount of money for 12 months. And you look at this multiplied by several hundred projects, all of a sudden Ashgrove is a bank. So we're quite happy with these projects. As we've just described it, a project where the work can be turned around fairly quickly. Sorry, for some reason my screen has gone blank. Apologies. So, okay. So somebody might give me the thumbs up there to say that everything is okay. My screen has gone weird here. I'm just going to kill that and maybe just start again. Apologies now for 2 seconds, guys. Okay, sorry about that. Don't know what happened, it just went blank. Okay, so yeah, so that's a one-stop shop. It's a quick project. The project is going to cost, I'm going to say 50K. There's 30K of grants. The customer pays 10,000 at the start, that being 50% of the net amount. They pay us 10,000 at the start. When we're finished, they pay us another 10,000. So they're paid in full, and we go off to get the grants from the government. That's typically a quick project. Now, by comparison, a BEC has all of the same grants. We saw that in the previous slide. So all of the same bonus payments, the project management, the windows and the doors, which you couldn't get as an individual measure. But so what is the difference between the one-stop shop and the BEC? Again, a homeowner can avail of it, or a landlord. It's a multiple upgrade package. You have to reach the B2, so this is all the same. But in this case, the homeowner can actually go off and do the works themselves. So for argument's sake, we'll take a case study in a second. We'll look at it, say a house that's 100 years old that's been totally gutted and there's a builder in there anyway. So he can carry out the works. It doesn't have to be a one-stop shop. And all of the same grants are available, but the methodology is a little bit different. So again, the houses have to be before 2011 and has to reach the B2. So, but critically, there is a contractor on site. The main problem with this now being, if you can imagine, under the one-stop shop, everything that is grant related, floor insulation, wall insulation, windows, doors, attic insulation, heat pumps, solar, ventilation, whatever it is, all of those have to be paid for by the one-stop shop. So you can imagine now your contractor is doing some of the work. All of a sudden you have a one-stop shop also doing parts of the work, and we both have a contract with the homeowner, and we probably also have to have a contract with each other. So now Ashgrove has a contract with the contractor has a contract with the homeowner, and Ashgrove has a contract with the homeowner. We have a three-way contract, and of course that's a nightmare. The day there's a problem, everybody is pointing the finger at everybody else. So we don't get into that scenario. If there is a builder on site, we say, we will tell you what to do to get the grants. We'll tell you the thickness of the floor insulation, the thickness of the wall insulation, the U values of the doors, the U values of the windows, the attic insulation. We will give you all of that in the contract. We will even do some of it for you if you want, but your contractor is running the project for you on your behalf. You will pay him as you go. And we'll just say the contract is costing 100 grand now because you're building an extension and you're doing up a house kind of from scratch. And you go off and you pay him the 100,000, and we will on your behalf claim the 30,000 when the project is finished, provided your builder gives us all the paperwork. Now we make that very simple for him. We will then claim your 30,000 and give it to you. If we're not doing any of the work for you, we typically charge just an administration fee there. That administration fee depends on the amount and the complexity of the work, but I suppose a rule of thumb is probably somewhere between 3,000 to 4,500. And the reason for that is 23% of that sadly is VAT. There's no VAT on the grants. And secondly, under a BEC, we have a fee of €1,000 we have to pay. Anyway, that's a bit of an explanation. And so number one, there's a contractor on site in the case of BEC. And secondly, these projects are typically over the 2 months and up to 12 months. So you can go off, you can deal with your builder, you know what the game plan is, you can ring us at any stage and we'll assist you. And as we gather all of the paperwork at the end, we will make sure that we've all the I's dotted and T's crossed and we have all the evidence that we need. So I'm going to look at a project here. I'm not going to do that slide. I'm just going to skip straight forward to our case study. So this is a one-stop shop case study. It's a semi-detached house. We did it about 2 years ago. The year of construction was 2003, so they're relatively modern. You can see a picture on the bottom right there, two of them side by side in that estate. The house was 103 square meters, 2-story, and the pre-works BER was a C2. So before we started, the house was a C2. Now, we don't care what it really is, or we don't really care what it is before. All we need to know is that it needs to be B2 or better when we finish. So when these people contacted us, what they were looking for originally was solar panels. Solar panels at the time for these houses would have cost somewhere around €7,000. And what we advised them is, we think that's the wrong move. You're leaving an awful lot of money after you, and for slightly more money, you get an awful lot more. So we said, what you're talking about is getting a grant through an individual measure grant. If we advise you to jump into the one-stop shop or the BEC grants. And so what they ended up getting was attic and cavity insulation, which they kind of thought was okay, but 2003 was, as well as 20 years ago now. And so they had about 4 inches of insulation in the attic. We bumped that up to 12 inches. The cavity wall was what we call full filled with bead. They got an air to water heat pump, and they got solar panels, and they got all of that done for €8,106. So in this case, to go through it as a one-stop shop, what they would have done is they'd have paid us 50% of that up front. They'd have paid us whatever that is, €4,053 up front. We would do the project, and at the end of the week, that's a relatively quick project now, we do the attic and the walls on the same day. Theoretically, you could do the heat pump or the solar the following day. By the end of the week, you're putting in the other one, the heat pump or the solar. And by Friday, your electrician is arriving and you're wiring everything. So by the end of the week, you're finished. So the customer pays over their 8,106 at that point. They're fully paid up, and Ashgrove go off to claim the grant, which in this case would have been 20-something thousand from SAAI. And this is a post-works BER of A3. So they went from C2 to A3 for €8,000. So you can see there that the grants are really after kicking in. That's obviously a great deal for the customer, but it's an easy project as well for us. We send in a project manager. The project is done in, I'm going to say idealistically or ideally, in a week. Typically, of course, never runs as smoothly as you think it will at the moment. Hard to get some subcontractors or maybe materials or heat pumps, but we just say it'll happen in 2 weeks. And then we go off and we claim our money back from the grant, but we're not waiting for 13 months or 14 months for a project to finish. So that's a typical one-stop shop project in our opinion. Alternatively, we have this fella, or some form of this fella, where there's a builder going in clearly. So an old house, there's a builder going to be here, and he's going to be here for 8 or 10 or 12 months. So we would call this a one-stop shop. And here's an example of a project, a house that was built in 1970s. It was 103 square meters, so very similar, identical in size to the last one actually. And I'm just going to zoom in here now so you can see the grants. Apologies. So in this case, if this looks like your project, just to go through the figures with you. By the way, in this case, all of this stuff is work that the customer would be doing anyway. So 6,500 for the heat pump, plus the 2,000 to upgrade the heating. He was going to have to do that anyway. That 1,000 there shouldn't be marked. It's after slipping. Launch bonus of €2,000. Attic insulation for detached houses, €1,500 again. Sorry guys, these are after slipping here somehow. I know that in this case, the customer went floor insulation. They put in the solar, so they got 4 kilowatts. So that's 2,400 for solar. 3,500 for the floor insulation. Sorry, I said they went external wrap, which is €8,000. They got windows, which you can't, as we said, under the individual measure grant, €4,000 for the windows, 8,000 for each external door, maximum of 2, so that's €1,600. Ventilation, air tightness is it. We'll talk about it in a second. It's a very difficult grant, or sorry, it's not a difficult grant. It's the only one that we don't know at the start. Every other grant that we do, when we come up with a plan at the start and we do our BER, we do the energy rating, that never changes unless we decide to not do something. Whereas the air tightness, we actually have to physically test it. It's the only physical test that the house will undergo through the whole process. So when we tell a person that there's €1,000 for air tightness, there's always a question mark beside it, and we tell them not to bank on it, because sometimes it mightn't, some houses, dormer bungalows are often harder to get airtight than a two-story or a bungalow. So home energy assessment, 350, and project management is another bonus payment. Long story short, this house, for work that they were going to do anyway, these people are getting 36,350. Indicate that picture of the house we just looked at. They're actually also going to get the vacant and derelict house grant, so I can add 70 onto this 36, so they're going to get 106,350 minus, I'm going to say 4,500 of fees for Ashgrove. But that's a typical BEC. So there's a local builder. You're working with him anyway. All we've done in this case is we've done the analysis for you at the start and say, here is what you need to do. You need to do the floor insulation to, I'm going to say 5 inches. You're going to need to dry line it, or do the cavity wall, or do external insulation. And we'll tell you the thickness depending on what it is. We'll do the same for the attic. The attic being on the flat, if you were standing inside in the attic, you're insulating below your feet. If you're in the attic and you're insulating above your head, that's called rafter insulation. We will calculate the thickness for all of these. We'll calculate the U value for the windows, U value for the doors, and then we'll go through the solar and the heat pump. But once we have that done, you then have a menu which you hand to your builder. We'll go and meet the builder if he hasn't gone through this process before, and we'll tell him, here's what you need to do. There isn't anything that he won't be familiar with. But once he comes back with all of those bits of work done, we then collate. We'll just say he used, I don't know, Munster joinery or rationale for the windows. He comes back to us with a page or a few pages showing the windows, type of windows, the U value. We'll put that into our little book of evidence. We'll have some photos. We'll see the same with the solar. We'll have all the certs from the solar guys, us maybe in most cases. Same with the heat pump. And we'll same with the floor insulation. We need some photos and some evidence of the thickness to make sure we hit the required insulation levels or U values. So that's kind of the difference between the two. The one-stop shop, in our view, as far as Ashgrove are concerned, are for quicker projects where we can get in and get out, and we're not acting as a bank for 14 months. I know not everybody will be happy to hear that, but we're quite open in saying it. We're simply not a bank. We've just have too many projects on. But the BEC offers the homeowner exactly the same grant amounts, but you're not getting it funded for you. Yeah, I know people will be giving out, but can't keep everybody happy all of the time, as they say. So eligibility criteria, just to run through it very quickly. For one-stop shop or the BEC, before it has to be built before 2011. We must get to a B2 or higher after we're finished. We must improve the performance of the house by 100 kilowatt hours per square meter per annum. So like this is like miles per gallon for your car. We want to make it better. And in this case, we're measuring in kilowatt hours per annum. So the government don't want to give you 25,000 or 30,000 to make a good house marginally better or a terrible house marginally less terrible. They want you to have an appreciable jump, and we measure that in kilowatt hours. We, as the project coordinator for you, whether it's a one-stop shop or a BEC, we have to provide evidence. It's a thing called an SR50, and this will demonstrate and provide evidence for the fact that a heat pump is suitable for your house. So there's two sides to that. Number one, the house itself isn't too leaky. So number one, I suppose that we don't have a really leaky house. And that the heat pump is big enough, so the house is losing, I'm just going to say 10 kilowatts and the heat pump is 12 kilowatts. We need to provide that evidence. But secondly, and probably more importantly, is the next bit. Every room in the house needs to be analysed, because some rooms are colder than others. So a sunroom is typically colder than your bedroom. It has a lot more glazing, and whether we like it or not, glazing has a U value 5 to 10 times worse than a wall. In other words, glass loses significantly more heat than an insulated wall. There's no surprise in that, despite the fact some people get very insulted when I tell them about their windows are worse than the wall. You know, they paid a lot for the windows, but the reality is a window is simply not made out of insulation. Anyway, long story short, any room that we look at, we need to calculate the heat loss of the walls, windows, roof, floor, and so on. And then we need to calculate the size of the radiator and then say, right, is that radiator going to heat this room when I connect it to a heat pump? And we typically run the heat pump at 50 degrees. It can run hotter, but the efficiency gets worse. It's like driving your car at 100 miles an hour. Yes, it will definitely do it, but you shouldn't do it for obvious reasons. But also the efficiency and the economy is really gone out the window. So the SR50 is a pain in our butt, but it is evidence for the homeowner and for SEAI that the heat pump is suited to the house, and secondly, that the radiators are big enough for each room, and that's very important. The next thing we have to do, and we do this as part of the BER, so for any project we start off with the BER, we need to take this thing called a heat loss indicator. Again, we view any house like a bucket that we're putting water into. We first of all need to understand how leaky is the bucket. If the bucket is really, really leaky, they're going to say, fix the leaks before we start trying to do anything else. So this is known as a heat loss indicator, and we measure it in watts per square meter per degree Kelvin. Don't worry about any of these details, guys. These are for us to worry about. The only reason that we talk about them here is some people don't understand this is quite mathematical. We have these hoops to jump through, and when we come back in a small number of cases and tell the customer we can't, your house can't comply, they think it's Shane doesn't want to give me money. It's very simple. I'm not giving away my own money at all. So, or the company's money. This is SEAI's money. And their job is to give it out. But if the figures don't marry up to the guidelines, it's simply computer says no. There's no going forward. So, but don't get bogged down in the detail, guys. This is just to give you an indication of the hoops we have to jump through. So that 2 watts. If it's 2 watts or less, that tells us that the house is maybe not quite modern standard, but it's not far away from it. And in that case, they're happy to give you a grant towards a heat pump. They don't want you putting heat pumps into leaky houses because you're camouflaging the inefficiency of the house with cheap energy. And, you know, that's not the name of the game. So the HLI has to be below 2 watts. Now, if it is not below 2 watts, despite what Shane just said, if it's between 2 and 2.3, they'll give you a second bite at the cherry, but now they want more evidence. So they start asking more questions. Well, Shane, tell us now about the windows. Are the windows as good as what, you know, they call these backstops, a kind of a worst case scenario? If the window is better than the worst case scenario, if the walls are better than the worst case, and so on, they'll still allow you to get it. But at that point, they're asking more questions. And in some cases, if we're falling in there and somebody isn't willing to change the windows, for example, you might actually, your whole project might fail because your windows maybe might be slightly worse. In your eyes, they might be perfect. They were put in 17 years ago, but in some cases they might fail. And that fails then for like maybe the entire project maybe fails because of it. But we would know this before we start. So in some cases, we need to do an air test when we're finished. I would say in the last 12 months, I hope I'm not lying, I don't think we've done any air test that we needed to do. We've done some because we wanted to do them, but we haven't needed to do them to satisfy SEI in any case. Hope I'm not lying there, but I'm fairly confident. And then they also question these individual fabric element backstops. Apologies for the terminology. A fabric element might be a wall or a window or whatever, and the backstop is this maximum or worst case scenario. So don't worry about it. So in this case, I suppose when we're applying for any one of these grants, whether it's a one-stop shop or a BEC, the BER needs to be current, so it can't be 10 years old. It needs to be less than 12 months. And if you're intending on getting a heat pump, you also need a thing called a technical assessment. Now, the technical assessment is an add-on to a building energy rating, to a BER, and not all BER assessors are qualified technical assessors. So if you're going down the route of a heat pump, you definitely need a guy who's a technical assessor. You have up to 12 months from when you do that BER and technical assessment, you have up to 12 months to lodge your application. Now, I'll reiterate, do not worry about some of the data or the figures or the jargon above. It has to be spoken about because people need to understand that there are rules to the game. It isn't just a case of Shane handing out the government's money wherever he wants. There are criteria and evidence will be looked for all of this when we're finished. So where would we start? So the first thing, I suppose, anybody who hasn't already spoken to us, give us a quick call. We ask typically 17 questions. It is the last time I checked, it was 17 questions. They'll ask you for your air code. They'll ask you the type of house, when it was built. They'll ask you for your MPRN number. So that's the little number on top of your electricity bill. It's an 11-digit code. We can check various things from that number. We'll ask if you've ever done a BER. We'll ask what works you're considering doing, if any. So what we do then is we hand that to one of our analysts or in-house BER experts, and we can very quickly tell by looking at a project, look, that will definitely fall into a one-stop shop, a BEC or BEH, and a small number of them, it's not obvious. And in that case, what we would say is, if you want to roll the dice, go and get a BER done, and you'll know that will cost you somewhere around 500 quid. But I would say in 80 to 90% of cases, we're able to tell the customer, look, what you're describing there will definitely get a grant. I am happy and confident in telling you, you're either getting, I don't know exactly how much grant you're getting because we haven't done the analysis yet, but you're getting 20,000, you're getting 25, you're getting 31. But it isn't, if I'm telling somebody they're getting somewhere between 30 and 32,000, I know it wouldn't be below 27. And therefore, I'm happy to say, the same as if it was, my brother or my mother, go away and do your BER. It's going to cost you 500 quid, but you're getting back north of 27. Once we do that BER, we then need to agree what you're going doing, right? And who's going doing it. So if you're going doing, say, a BEC project where you have your own little builder, he's building an extension out the back, and as part of that, he's going to upgrade the existing house. So that's fine. That'll take a contract in one shape. If we'll say, like the one-stop shop project we were talking about there, we're going to do your solar panels, your heat pump, your back door, your front door, the attic insulation wall, and maybe we need to change 5 radiators because they're not big enough. That's fine. We can agree that in a contract. And in that contract, we'll know who's doing what works are being done, who's doing them, what the prices are, the deadlines, fees, in some cases, in the case of the BEC type project, energy credits. We didn't talk about the energy credits there a while ago, and normally I do. The energy credits are where you make an improvement to your house that results in an improvement in the carbon emissions. you generate what's known as a carbon credit. In other countries, it's known as a carbon, sorry, in other countries it's a carbon credit. Here it's an energy credit, and we can trade that on your behalf. So for the second project we looked at, there is probably worth about maybe €1,000 or €1,200. It hops around a little bit, and it's quite volatile at the moment. So the value of those energy credits is dropping. But either way, they're worth something to somebody. And who buys those is a company like SSE Electricity or Bord Gáis, or these guys. They're called obligated parties. They're obligated because they're selling carbon, selling fossil fuels. They're obligated to do works themselves to reduce carbon. And in this case, the easiest thing to do is them to pay for your good work. And so they pay you €1,000 or €700 or whatever it is. And in the last case there, it says waivers. There's very few cases anymore where waivers are needed, so I no need to discuss it here. So then, once you're happy that Ash Grove is doing the work, or that your local builder is doing the work, and that Ash Grove are holding his hand and steering him through the grants, we'll apply for the grant. So we, in the case of the BEC and the one-stop shop, we apply for those on your behalf. In the case of the individual measures that we spoke about at the start, you apply for that yourself. But we're assuming here at this stage, you're either a one-stop shop or a BEC. We apply for it. In the case of the one-stop shop, you get immediate approval. And I mean, that's 5 minutes, you get an email back saying, yeah, that project is all good, fire ahead. In the case of a BEC, it's typically a 6-week turnaround. Now, the reason for that is it goes in as part of a bigger project. So we might have 10 houses, we might have a community centre, we might have a school or something like that. We put it together as a community project and lodge it. And if for any reason, maybe they don't like the school or the community centre or something like that, they'd kick it back to us. But we would always know that our house will be acceptable in the next application. So we would have no fear of that ever being an issue. And so, yes, it says, strictly speaking, a BEC takes up to 6 weeks to get the green light. What we always do is we just start away knowing that we're getting the green light. So, 2 seconds. Okay, 2 seconds now. So once we get the green light on the one-stop shop of the BEC, we receive the grant approval. We start away, and we now have 12 months in which to complete the project. During COVID, they were allowing you to go kind of 13 months or 14 months, but we'd have to keep them updated, etc. And I'm sure they'd still accept that today. But now, for any reason somebody thought they were going to be more than 12 months, we might put in the application slightly later. Strictly speaking, not maybe in the spirit of it, but they don't really care. And if you think about it, what difference does it make whether it's 12 months or 13 months? And they, to be fair to SEI, they're not really, I think they're being extremely fair on that. So, so that's the criteria on that. I'm going to skip forward to, I just have a question there. Yeah, that's a good question there on the MPRN. So I said there about the 17 questions. If there's no MPRN, there actually at some point will have been an MPRN. It might currently not be there, but in that case, we revert to a slightly clunkier scenario. We just say, look, here's a house. There's evidence it was there 20 years ago. The electricity has been disconnected. Therefore, we don't have an MPRN. That's not an issue. Yeah, my own house is a perfect example of this. The electricity was disconnected, I'm going to say 15 years ago. The house is 150 years old. It's clear that the house was there. There's nobody going to ever dispute that. And to be fair, I suppose the application process, there isn't a clear way for that project to go in, but they're accepting all of them. At the end of the day, SAI want to, for the first time ever, they want to report figures in Brussels, and they have targets. And so it's not a case anymore of we have 300 million here, best to look getting it off us. They want to give this money out now. And so we're often quick to criticize them and some of the processes, but overall, we think they're doing a great job now. Some things are clunkier than others, and we don't always agree with their methodologies, etc. But overall, yeah, we're happy. So I hope I'm after answering that last question. In the case that there's no electricity connection, therefore there's no MPRN, don't worry about it, that's no issue. In the case of derelict property, yeah, all of that is no problem. So that doesn't stop you getting the vacant or derelict or anything to do with the SEI. We just have to provide evidence that the house is older than, like the MPRN is one way of us demonstrating that the house is pre-2011. That's all. That's why we're asking it, and it also tells us if there was ever grants drawn, right? But if we can say, right, there's no MPRN, but here's a photo of the house, and it's, you know, we can put in, I don't know, something from Cork County Council or Galway County Council showing that that house existed in 1970. Well, that's the end of that. They'll give you the grant. What were we for time? So 10 past. I'll give a quick run through solar here, literally 5 minutes, and we'll wrap it up. This is, I suppose, one that we're asked about, I suppose, most often. So we won't go into how the photovoltaic cells themselves work. So that's where, but basically solar energy hits the cells, and we get what's known as direct current. So which we get from any battery, a car battery or a little AA battery. But we can't use that as it stands. So we need to convert that over to alternating current. We're all familiar with the terminology. How it goes from DC to AC is what we call an inverter. It inverts the power, and we get alternating current. And before we go into that inverter, and I don't have it shown on this drawing here, if we did have surplus power and we were installing a battery, that's where we would install it, and that power gets stored in the, you know, if I had a day where I'm generating 6 kilowatt and my house is only consuming 3 kilowatt, well, I have a surplus now that I have to decide what I want to do with. So I might decide, okay, Shane, we'll put this into the hot water tank, or I'll maybe charge an electric vehicle or whatever. As a last resort, I will send it back out onto the grid, and I will get paid 20 or 25 cents for it. But the reason it's a last resort is if I send it to the grid and I get paid, or I get credit for it at a rate of 20 cents, well, tonight at 11 o'clock when I go to buy back electricity, now that I want it again, I'm going to pay 40 cents for it. So the last thing I want to do is give it away for 20 and have to buy it for 40. So that's where the battery comes in. I would say that probably about 50% of the projects we see do not deserve batteries, because there are various reasons, and we do a seminar on an online seminar on that every second Wednesday. So again, you'll find that on our website, ashgrove.ie, at the bottom of the homepage. So it's every second Wednesday, and we just go into how we design solar, why we use battery, why we might not use a battery, or where a battery isn't a positive thing. So we go through that. And then once we come through the inverter, and I'm going using it, we essentially steer it into the fuse board. Now, so I now have two wires coming to my fuse board, one from the mains electricity from the road and the other one from my solar. And it essentially, whatever is running is what gets my solar energy. So if I have the tumble dryer on and it's consuming 2 kilowatts and I'm producing 5 kilowatts, well, 2 of the 5 would go to the tumble dryer. One might go to the heat pump. The television might be 50 watts, or I might have whatever, lights, cooker, etc. So they're all running away. So so it's as simple as that. So some people think the solar is only doing hot water. It's a question I'm asked all the time, and but it will do, yes, it will do hot water, but it will do everything else in the house as well. But keep in mind, on a day like today that was really sunny, if the solar panel is generating 6 kilowatt, my house is only using 2, I have 4 surplus. If it's the other way around, where the solar is only generating 2 and my house needs 6, well, now I have a shortfall, and in that case I get the additional 4 from the grid. So I still can consume my own 2, I have those, I just need to also buy 4 more. And of course in winter that's the way it'll be. So guys, I'm not going to go into that anymore. As I say, that solar webinar is on every second Wednesday. It's at lunchtime, actually. I don't know whether the timing is good or bad. We try to run this seminar on a Tuesday evening and also on a Thursday at lunchtime. And we also do the solar one at lunchtime every second Wednesday. We hope that the timings are suitable and that they work for you. We're trying to accommodate, of course, school runs and work runs and training and piano lessons, etc. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you very much for attending. Drop us a line if you need any further information on this. As I said at the start, my name is Shane Murphy. I'm Technical and Sales Director, so feel free to fire any questions at me or any of the team here. And that's it. Best of luck. Thank you very much for joining us. Goodbye.